Samupe, Sampadia, Chimafidi non kotu, era one radio. Samupe, Jumpadia, Chimafidi non kotu, era one radio. Oh, and Pampuma, Asam Pampuma.
They are four women. They are beautiful with brains. They are eloquent, decent, wise, and experienced. You have heard many, the funny. Now, it's time to hear the experience and the brainy. Meet Selena, Dorcas, Gifty, and Annette as they present the real in common getting. In common biaye sesi chain, the dead, as in takre no assume the dead, the real in common getting. Showing live this and every Sunday, 7 p.m. on Era One Radio on Facebook and on YouTube, Era One Radio and on Taibo channel. Kaise, so we see the real in common getting what brabon tete, we nyan konsa, we the real in common getting.
Samupe, Sampadia, Chimafidi non kotu, era one radio. Samupe, Jumpadia, Chimafidi non kotu, era one radio. Oh, and Pampuma, Asam Pampuma.
Hello. Good evening, One Radio listeners and viewers all over the world. It's another Thursday on the Divine Connection Show, a subdivision of the Era One Radio Ministry. This is Thursday, the 21st of August 2025. We are broadcasting live from the studios. We are broadcasting live on Facebook, YouTube, Modern Ghana Radio, and also TikTok. Well, Pastor Akron is here as usual to explain to us what Genesis chapter 12, verse 1 to 6 means. Of course, when we come to Divine Connection, not only are we buying time or using time or just saying whatever we want to say, but this is a teaching platform, a teaching moment where we want to take portions of the scriptures, the Bible, and expand it and, actually place you on the points where you can really utilize all the cells that God has given you to delve into the scriptures and learn what have not been learned, unlearn some and learn fresh ones. So we take a scripture here and we go into details. We actually captivate your mind to take a deeper look at the scripture. Tonight we're going to be looking at questions like, did Abraham actually disobey God from the command that was given him? And if he did, what were the consequences of disobedience? We are told that Sarah was barren. Why was Sarah barren? Was it because of Abraham's disobedience, or was it more? Was the punishment that God gave, was it immediate or was it a long-term effect? And when God asked Abraham to live, did he live in the way God designed it or ordered him to live, or he just used his own mind? Or was somebody behind the move? Was there somebody who was hindering Abraham to do what God had ordered him to do? Tonight, we're also going to learn that when God gives us an order, do we follow to the last detail or we do what we want to do? That is what we're going to explore tonight. And with me here is Pastor Akron to go deeper. All right, Pastor Akron, I think our time is far gone, so we can't do much of a warm-up. But like I said earlier on, did Abraham actually disobey God? Because you wouldn't see it explicitly stated in the Bible from Genesis chapter 12. Do you want me to read it, or we are familiar with it?
Yeah, let's read it. Genesis 11:31 to 32, and then 12:1 to 6. So go ahead, read it. Yeah.
You want me to go to chapter 11 first?
Yes, 11:31 to 30, because that's where so you can start even from 30, because that's where it mentions that Sarah was barren, right? And then, so 9 verses.
All right. Okay. Let's go to the 30. All right. So Genesis chapter 11, verse 30. But Sarah was barren. She had no child. And Terah took Abram his son, and Lot the son of Haran his son's son, and Sarah his daughter-in-law, his son Abram's wife. And they went forth with them from Ur of the Chaldees to go into the land of Canaan. And they came unto Haran and dwelt there. And the days of Terah were 205 years, and Terah died in Haran. All right, let me go to chapter 12, verse 1. Now the Lord has said unto Abram, Get thee out of thy country and from thy kindred and from thy father's house unto a land that I will show thee. And I will make of thee a great nation, and I will bless thee and make thy name great, and thou shalt be a blessing. And I will bless them that bless thee, and curse him that curseth thee. And in thee shall all families of the earth be blessed. So Abram departed as the Lord had spoken unto him. And Lot went with him, and Abraham was 75 years old when he departed out of Haran. And Abram took Sarah his wife, and Lot his brother's son, and all their substance that they had gathered, and souls that they had gotten in Haran. And they went forth to go into the land of Canaan, and into the land of Canaan they came. 6. And Abram passed through the land unto the place of Sichem, unto the plain of Moriah, and the Canaanite was there in the land. Amen.
Amen.
All right, over to you, Pastor Akron. I think I did pose the first question already. Did Abram disobey God, and what were the consequences?
Okay, Dr. Boison, nowhere in the Bible has it been explicitly stated that Abraham disobeyed God. But that is the nature of good writing. A good author does not always state facts explicitly. A good writer with pedagogy on his mind, that is, a good writer putting out a writing piece with the intent of actually forcing people to use their mind, do critical thinking, will leave out certain things from being explicitly stated. And it will fall on the reader to tease out or extract the intended information from the text as given. And the person, it is interesting to know that every statement, every explicitly stated text would also necessarily include implicit statements. That means things that are true but have not been stated. So the stated information also include unstated information. And the mark of a critical thinker is to be able to tease out the implicit statements from the explicitly stated facts, right? And so that is what we have to understand here, that the author actually did more of showing rather than telling in this particular text. Because the way he structured the text and then the things that happened later in terms of God gave out 4 commands in Genesis 12, chapter 1. God said, Abraham, leave your country, leave your kindred, which means your relatives, leave your father's house, and go to a place I will show you, or a land I will show you. These are the 4 commands. It turned out that the land God would show Abraham was the land of Canaan. So 4 commands. Leave your country. Leave your relatives, leave your father's house, go to the place I will show you. So, Dr. Boison, if we look at the details as to the execution of the directives of the command or the demands of the command, what has the author given us? Right? And that is what we want to use to really come to an agreement, our understanding as to whether Abraham carried out the dictates of the command or he didn't faithfully carry out the dictates. And if he didn't, could there have been a price to pay? Could there have been consequences? And if there were, what were those consequences? How do we use the facts given to really tease out ideas that will enable us to actually make claims that Abraham, in fact, disobeyed and paid the price as a result? And that is the quest for our being here tonight. So, Dr. Boison, to answer that question, we will actually refer back and forth. We'll actually quote a lot from the text directly to make our points. Right? Now, Dr. Boison, let me introduce you asked me to do something. Show how many possible ideas are hidden in text, right?
Yes, sir.
Read on that. So we have seriously 8 verses. Genesis 11:31 to 32, and then Genesis 12:1 to 6. With only 8 verses, Dr. Boison, I teased out 75 facts that are explicitly, right? 75 facts. And so to know how many ideas are hidden within these 75 facts, you do what we call, you work out the cardinality, because each fact stated in this text could be true or it could be false. So that makes each fact a proposition.
Okay.
And we've said it over and over. We've had occasions to really explain what this means. A fact is a sentence or a claim. And because of that, we have to turn it into a proposition. A proposition is a declarative statement that has value. And the value could be true or false. Every proposition, therefore, has 2 possible values, true or false. And therefore, to get the number of ideas one can glean from a text is to look at how many facts one can actually tease out from the text. And then raise that number of facts to that number of facts. So if one is able to tease out 10 facts from a text, that means you have 10 propositions, each being either true or false.
Okay.
Therefore, to get what we call the power cardinality of the number of facts, what you do is to raise 2, because the 2 are the values, either true or false, to the number of propositions you come up with. If you are able to tease out, let's say, 5 facts out of the text, then it is 2 raised to the power 5, which is 32. If it is 6, 64. If it is 7, 128. So, you keep multiplying by 2. Dr. Boison, we have 75 facts that I teased out from this text. So, Dr. Boison, on your screen, bring up your calculator. And let's see, for people to know what we are trying to do. If you take 2 raised to the power 75, Dr. Boison, it is mind-boggling how many facts one can tease out of these 8 verses alone. The ideas. I got, Dr. Boison, knock, knock, knock. I got over, actually, 37, how many? 5, 8, 11,
28 characters.
23 digits, right? Which will give you 37 octillion, 778 septillion, 931 quintillion, 862 quadrillion, 957 trillion, 161 billion, 709 million, 568 ideas. Mind-boggling. Dr. Boison, the question is, why is this important for us? It simply means that if one develop the skill and the tool to create more information out of given information, we realize that there is so much information to work with that we don't even scratch the surface. And so 2 raised to the power 75 from 8 verses, Dr. Boison, we can confidently say that a modern spreadsheet cannot handle it. The ideas one can tease out from these 8 verses, a modern spreadsheet cannot handle it. That's how many lines? A modern spreadsheet will crash, handling the amount of information hidden in these 75 facts. At least, Dr. Boison, there are over 10 trillion ideas. I said, seriously, it's over 10,000 trillion ideas, if one can wrap his mind around it, in this test alone. And so we are going to use these facts to answer the question whether Abraham, in actual fact, disobeyed God, or at least didn't fully carry out the demands of the question God asked him, right? And if he didn't, could we actually make leaps of faith in terms of claiming that Abraham must have paid a price? Because the argument, Dr. Boison, is looking at what we just read. God said, I will bless you. In you shall the families of the earth be blessed. I will make your name great. Blah, 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 blah. If such promises were made, how come that Abraham gave birth at the age of 86, and it was with a woman who was not, his wife? Why would Abraham be such an outlier? And Dr. Boison, I mean, I'm giving you some ideas. If you read from Genesis chapter 5 all the way to 11, you realize that the author has given us the genealogy of the people. And one of the things that come out of these genealogies is that after Noah, that's after the flood, all the people who lived after the flood, right? That means the son of Shem, who was Noah's second son, right? From that generation onwards, all the way to Abraham's father, Terah, Dr. Boison, everybody gave birth to their first child between age 29 and age 35. So the range, right, of fatherhood before Terah was low 29 to high 35. Now, Terah gave birth to his first son at 70, so Terah became an outlier. That means, yes, Terah became an outlier. He gave birth at age 70. Before him, the person who waited the longest before getting his first child only waited for 35 years. Terah doubled that. So Terah was an outlier. How come the man God called, Abraham, will be a worse outlier than Terah? So
was the sense of the father being visited on the son?
We don't know, but God didn't call the father. God called Abraham. And looking at the promises God made, one could say, how could you make such promises and yet the person who was to reap the promises had this sort of experience, to the extent that Abraham had to complain to God that you, God, you've made these promises to me, yet I don't have a child of my own. And somebody who was born in my house, literally a servant, was going to be my heir. And God had to assure Abraham that he was going to be faithful. And so these are valid questions. And therefore, the author doesn't have to explicitly tell us that Abraham must have been paying a price for disobedience if we could prove that. And so the question today, can we prove, are there sufficient facts in the text given that we can use to support any claim of disobedience on Abraham's part? And I believe we could. And so we will take the commands one by one and look at the execution of that command and come to a conclusion as to whether there was total obedience or there was partial obedience or there was outright disobedience. That is what we are going to do. So, Dr. Boison, we'll take the first one by one, right? Now, if you read Genesis chapter 12, verse 1, that's where the author tells us that God gave out a command. And the interesting thing about this text is that the author starts by saying, now God had, not God has, which means God had already spoken before chapter 12. God had spoken to Abraham. God had commanded Abraham at least in chapter 11 or before, right? And so chapter 12 will not be the first place that we'll hear God commanding Abraham, because of the way the author said, God had commanded Abraham. Are we getting the picture clear? So we have to go back to the previous chapter or chapters to see where God must have given the command. And we can make that inference in Genesis chapter 11, verse 31, because we see some actions there that will clue us as to what was being done and in reference to what, or as a reaction to what. So this is the way the author put that, right? Dr. Boison, this is Genesis chapter 11, right?
Yes, sir.
Verse 31. Verse 31 starts by saying, and Terah took Abram his son, and Lot the son of Haran, his son's son, and Sarah his daughter-in-law, his son Abram's wife, and they went forth with them from Ur of the Chaldees to go into the land of Canaan, and they came unto Haran and dwelt there. That gives us a clue, right? Because we know that God asked Abraham to leave his country. That was an explicit command. And we know that as at the time this command came, Abraham was living in his country called the Ur of the Chaldees. Are you getting me?
Yeah.
We would then also know the destination God would show him was the land of Canaan. So we know the origin and we know the destination, right? So the first command, leave your country, we know that it will be leaving Ur of the Chaldees. And then the last command, I will show you to the place to go. We will get to know the last command, the fulfillment of it will be location in the land of Canaan. So the question is, it was Abraham that God talked to. The command came to Abraham. How come in verse 31, Genesis chapter 11, verse 31, somebody else was calling the shots and not Abraham? Because it was Terah, Abraham's father, who was taking everybody with the intent to go to Canaan, not Abraham. Now, why is this important? Dr. Boison will realize that in Genesis 11:32, Terah will be dead. And then 12:1, it will be Abraham in charge. So look at verse 5, Genesis chapter 12, verse 5. You will see that what Terah did in Genesis 11:31, Abraham was doing the same thing with almost the same diction being used. And it is Genesis 12:5.
Pastor Con, do we have any idea how long they stayed in Haran?
Actually, I've done the calculation and I couldn't get any particular figure, but I suspect from every indication the fact that Haran, that's Abraham's firstborn, who was the father of both Lot and Sarah, right? Haran didn't go with the family to the Ur of the child to Haran. He didn't. And so the fact also that when Abraham was living, right, again, we are using facts from the text, right? From the Genesis 12:5, Dr. Boison, this is what we are told. And Abraham took Sarah his wife and Lot his brother's son and all their substance that they had gathered where? In Haran.
Yeah.
As well as souls that they had gotten in Haran. So they must have stayed or lived in Haran for a considerable number of years for them to be able to gather servants as well as substance. Are you getting me?
Yes, sir. Okay.
Because these additional facts in verse 5, we didn't read it in Genesis 11:31. They are not part of the text in Genesis 11:31. So we know that for them to have become so rich in Haran, they must have lived there for a certain number of years. So I am betting on the safe figure around 25 years.
25 years.
Yes.
Yeah. I know we don't have a specific amount. We only know
Right.
Abraham left when he was 75.
Yes.
And
so
his father died at
that
25.
because that means Abraham got to Haran at the age of 50.
50.
Right? 50. And Terah got to Haran at the age of 180. And Sarah got to Haran at the age of 40. Which are very believable numbers or figures. Because don't forget, Abraham and Sarah were already married in Ur of the Chaldees. Right? They were already married, and the author has told us Sarah was barren, which means they had lived for as a couple for some time in Haran before this adventure would even begin, right? So if they had been married for some time and no issue had come out, then it would be appropriate for the author to label Sarah as being barren. Are you getting that? So Sarah living the Ur of the Chaldees at the age of 40 and Haran living and Abraham living at the age of 50 is quite a reasonable number, right? And therefore, they, after Terah had died, right, will get to know that they had actually amassed quite a fortune in addition to servants, right? And so 25 years will be a safe figure, right? But
I
so
think
that's the
you're right.
argument.
Because I did a little reading, and they said Abraham must have been around, lived there for about 60 years.
I lived in Haran for about 60
About
years.
60 years, yes.
That whoever made that point could not, because then
So
Abraham
it says, if Abraham was born when Terah was 70 years old, then
No.
Abraham
was not born at the age of 70. Abraham
No,
was
I'm saying Abraham was born when Terah was 70 years old.
No. Abraham was born when Terah was 130 years.
130.
Yes, because don't forget, in verse 12, in chapter 12, verse 4, right? In verse 4, we've been told that Abraham was 75 years when he left Haran. And this was when his father died. And his father died at the age of 205.
Okay.
So if you subtract 75 from 205, you get 130. Meanwhile, Abraham gave birth to his first son at the age of 70. So Abraham could not have been the first son of Terah.
Okay.
You get me? So that calculation could not be right. Terah did not give birth to Abraham when Terah was 70. Terah was 130 when he gave birth to Abraham.
Then that is putting him at living in Haran for 75 years.
No,
That is also
Because
correct.
don't forget, he lived, the command to leave Air came to him when he was already in Air.
Okay.
Right? And he was already married. He didn't marry Sarah when they were living. He was already married to the extent that they had lived for some time and Sarah was not giving birth, such that the author would give us that explicit information that Sarah was barren in Genesis 11:30. And this was in Haran, and this was in Air, not in Haran, right? And as the point I made, when you go back to 11:31, it was Terah who was calling the shots, organizing everybody. But we have not been given the facts there that they had quite a huge fortune and servants. We were not told in Genesis 11:31. However, when Abraham was living after his father Terah had died, he left Haran with souls, right, which means servants, in addition to substance. And so our argument is Abraham must have lived in Haran for quite some time before making the trip to the ultimate destination God had shown him.
And so all this time he was living in obedience.
Well, he wasn't. And that's the point. And that's why it's important for to really handle this text with a certain degree of intellect, right? One really has to take the trouble to break down the text. And this is the first point. Dr. Boison, the first command was leave your country. So we have to define which country, what was the name of the country God was talking about. And that country was Air, because that's where Abraham was, right? So if God was asking Abraham to leave Air, right, our location in terms of the origin, where we can determine obedience or disobedience, will be Air of the Chaldees, right? So if we take the command, leave your country and look, we take that command in isolation and deal with it by itself, then we can see that all that was required of Abraham is to find himself outside the borders of Air of the Chaldees, and he will be in obedience, because the command was leave your country. So if you leave Air, you would have obeyed the command. You getting the point?
That's true, yeah.
Right. So if you take command 1 in isolation, the fact that Abraham was located in Haran after the command means Abraham had obeyed that command, because the command was leave your country, and that country was the Air of the Chaldees. So
something has come up. You mentioned earlier on that Terah was an outlier.
Yeah.
And when God gave the initial command to Abraham, Abraham was still young, so he could have broken that, so to speak, curse of late having a child.
Possibly, yes. But he didn't. And these are the arguments we are making, that Abraham necessarily must have paid a price. Necessary. Right? And that's why we are saying, was there disobedience? Because, Dr. Boison, when an author takes the trouble to give you certain facts, you use the facts to really make sense of the text, right? And so if we go back, as I said, you go back and you look at the genealogy, the author takes the trouble to give us how long a person lived before giving birth to his first son. And we come to the point where we look at the text pertaining to the post-flood childbirth phenomenon. And we realize that everybody until except Terah, everybody between age 29 to 35 had given birth. So how come Terah will give birth to his first son at 70? What had happened? What happened? Why? And then this time, God calls a man specifically and makes certain promises explicitly. I will bless you. I will make your name great. In you shall all families of the earth be blessed, and you yourself, you don't have a family. Does it make sense? Are you getting the point clear? Does it make sense? If you be blessed, in you, all the families of the earth will be blessed, and you don't have a family of your own, then how is the earth going to be blessed? How is the families of the earth going to be blessed? Right? So we have every reason to ask questions that, no, the author doesn't have to tell us explicitly that there was disobedience that came with a price or had consequences attached to that disobedience. And so, because we want to be able to know the nature of God as a result of really understanding this text at that deeper level, that, listen, even if God doesn't say certain things, there are principles in life that God himself has embedded into life as part of how the earth and life and the world, right, operates. So if you violate any of them, you have the cause and you have the effect.
Okay.
Right? Yeah. And the author doesn't have to explicitly tell us that Abraham disobeyed, but by the facts he's given us, we can make that inference that yes, there must have been disobedience, and yes, that obedience must have come with some consequences.
A price.
A price.
Yeah. And that's the essence of the argument we are making tonight. Right? So as I said, the first command, leave thy country. If we take that command in isolation, all that will be needed for obedience to be established was for Abraham to find himself outside the location of Ur of the Chaldees, which was his country. It doesn't matter how he got there. You getting me? If we take that command by itself, it doesn't matter how he gets there, right? Because all that will be required to establish obedience is for Abraham to find himself outside his country, which was the Ur of the Chaldees. And if he did, because the text will tell us they went to Haran and stayed there in Haran, right? So staying in Haran, which was not Abraham's country, right, would equate to what? Obedience. He would have had to physically leave Ur of the Chaldees to be able to stay or live in Haran. So yes, if you take the first command by itself, yes, Abraham obeyed the command, the first command. But that is where now problem crops in. Dr. Boison, because the second part of the command is that leave your relatives.
Okay, that one
Yeah, so if you take the first command and the second command together, their problems begin to arise. You getting the point? And that is the way one has to really explicate this text one by one.
Pastor, let's cut Abraham some slack. So God said, leave your father's country or whatever. Abraham must have thought that getting to Haran was where God wanted him to go.
Well, God was explicit. God was explicit. And Dr. Boison, again, if you take that first command and you slap the third command on it, you also see another picture emerging. Because Genesis 11:31 will tell us that it was Terah who was calling the shots, not Abraham, whom the command came to. Right? And so it was Terah who was deciding who went along and where they stayed, not Abraham. And then you have the command that says, leave your father's house. So if you are leaving your father's house, yet your father is going with you and calling the shots, are you obeying the command which says, leave your father's house?
To go to that. Yes.
You getting me? And so, if you come to the second command, we said, leave your kindred, and when you are leaving, you take Lot with you, you take your father with you, you take your wife who happens to be your niece with you. Is that obedience?
That is not.
That is not. Yeah. So that's what we are doing, and we are saying that the author doesn't have to state all this explicitly. We can extract based on the explication we make of the text, and we do it with high fidelity intelligence.
But if you go back to the verse 31, 1 of 11, the latter passages, and they went forth with them from Ar of the Chaldees to go into the land of Canaan. And they came unto Haran and dwelt there.
Yeah, so you know, based on what you did, the ultimate destination that God gave was Canaan. So how come they?
Yeah, what was the external factor that made them stay there?
Yeah. It was because Haran was Terah was old, right? So they had to make accommodations, right? Abraham had to make accommodations, and the question is, didn't God command you to leave your father's house? How come that your father is coming with you?
Still stuck with him. I mean, he could have made a nice excuse and leave, but he did not.
Yeah. And so we are getting to know the nature of God. We are getting to, this test is showing us, because, yeah, we know Abraham has been called the father of faith. Yeah, lovely. But did he disobey? And if he did he get the punishment? Yes, he did. So we can learn a lesson about God, that you don't violate the principle of God and think cut you a slack simply because you are the apple of his eye. Right? Because God is a God of principle. So God is working with principles, whether you are whatever. Once you violate any of his principles, there is a price to pay. That is the point here. And the author has done a good job of showing without telling. Dr. Boison, isn't it amazing? Look at it too. Further reading down, you realize that the blessing, immediately Lot separated from Abraham, God came to Abraham and said, look to the stars. If you can count the stars, that's the number. The number of stars, which will be over 100 billion, right? That's the number of people who will come out of you and will be blessed. After Lot had left, right? Oh, isn't it amazing? Dr. Boison, another point.
Yeah, if it's in Ghana, we'll say Abraham was the one he now was the one doing himself. Because if he had separated earlier on, his breakthrough would have come.
Yeah.
But Pastor Conda, what baffles me is that, fast forward in the New Testament, Paul was saying something like, you will leave your father and your mother and cleave to your wife or husband, whatever it is.
Yes.
And so this is where the issue of Abraham and Sarah was a kind of conflict. And I think you did mention that they were relatives.
Yeah. In actual fact, one can make a strong argument that Sarah was the younger brother of Lot, no, the younger sister of Lot. And so Sarah, Milcah, and Lot were the children of Haran, Terah's firstborn. And so we know that, listen.
So Abraham married his niece.
Yes, Abraham and his brother Nahor married their elder brother Haran's two daughters. So
they didn't want to go far. They didn't want to go far.
Yeah. There are things we can deduce, right? But that is the point. Incest. So when God asked him to leave, probably God was using a diplomatic tactic, right, to get him.
Leave his wife.
These are the things, because Dr. Boison, maybe we will make the same argument down the line. Listen, Sarah, let's face it, Sarah and Abraham had been married before Genesis 11:31.
Mm-hmm.
So factor in how long they lived in Haran, and Sarah hadn't given birth. Right? Now, they went to the promised land. The Bible will tell you, Abraham lived there. Sarah and Abraham lived there for 10 years, and Sarah still hadn't given birth.
Until Hagar.
And then Sarah would suggest to Abraham to go into her maid, Hagar. And immediately, Abraham went into Hagar. Hagar conceived. So the problem was not Abraham, it was Sarah. Are you not getting the point there?
Mm.
So the same thing that happened with Lot, when separation came between Abraham and Lot, the blessing started. The blessing that God had mentioned in the promises, it started. Now Sarah also, let's put it this way, takes herself out of the scene for a small period. Abraham immediately impregnated
somebody, a stranger.
Somebody, right? And so, what could this be coincidence?
But we also know too that Sarah's barrenness was due to God shutting her womb. Unlike Hannah, where we can say, okay, God shut her womb.
The text hasn't told us that God shut Sarah's womb. There is nothing in the text that tells us that it was God who shut Sarah's womb. But we know, Dr. Boison, from DNA analysis, that incest can lead to all kinds of complications.
That's true.
Right? Yeah. So these are some of the things. And again, the author doesn't have to explicitly state all this. But the facts the author has put on paper, we can use those facts to tease out the unstated truths. And then based on that, we can tell a story, a bigger story. Are you getting my point? And so, yes, if we take the two people he took that he shouldn't have taken, and what happened? Immediately he separated himself from them, and we know that, listen, something was operating. Right? So, again, we go back to our first question. Next week, we'll deal with the second question, right? We'll deal with that same thing, whether in isolation and in combination with other commands. Yeah. So the argument for tonight, the first question, the first command, yes, if Abraham found himself outside right, which was his country, anything and anyhow he found himself outside the borders of the heir of the Chaldees, that will satisfy the demand of obedience, because the command was leave your country. And here after the command, we found Abraham located in Haran and not in Ur.
Okay.
So that command by itself, if we take it by itself, yes, Abraham obeyed the God's command because he left Ur and went to live in Haran.
But that was a half obedience, and which is even more dangerous than more dangerous.
Yeah, but that's what we are saying. We are dealing with this one step at a time to get people the feel how to answer these questions. Because you see, if we don't take the trouble to really tease out these facts, people will just jump over very glaring facts and we wouldn't get the picture, right? So we want to do a good job, look at all the facts, state. So Dr. Boison, we know that, for example, if there are 4 commands, there are 16 possibilities in that command, because 4.
2 raised to the power 4.
4. You get me again? There's the complication, right? And we want to, Dr. Boison, you and I know we are using this platform to teach our audience how to make the Bible a tool of mind training, a tool to train the mind, so that the ultimate objective of developing through combining the fruits of the spirit and the fruits of the mind will be realized in the African, because that is the model that will build in us the ability to bring out God's purposes, use the mind to change the earth, and also at the same time quicken our spirit and prepare us for our ultimate destination.
Awesome. Nicely put. But let me ask this question, which means from what we've gathered tonight, it therefore presupposes and means that ancestral yoke or curses can be very dangerous.
Dr. Boison, yes, absolutely. In fact, to the extent God will say, I think in the book of Exodus as well as Leviticus somewhere, where he says the fathers have eaten sour grapes. And the children's teeth are set on edge. Not only that, God in the 10 Commandments will say, I'll visit the sins of the fathers on the sons, on the children, up to the 3rd, 4th, and 5th generation. So yes.
But this same Bible also says somewhere, I don't remember exactly, but it says that I will not pay the children with the sins of the fathers. I know it's a different context.
That's why progressive. We are looking at progressive. The father will get to the coming of Jesus, right?
Okay.
Who would actually lay aside and set aside this question of corporate responsibility and ancestral responsibility, set it aside so that the individual will bear his own sin and not the sins of the father until Christ came. Right? The sins of the fathers were visited on the children up to the 4th, 5th generation and beyond. Are you getting me? So here we are. If Abraham didn't disobey, Dr. Boison, you say that very telling. We can read this text and we'll ask ourselves some questions. Dr. Boison, isn't it interesting that when Abraham's son, Isaac, was of age to marry, Abraham actually went back to the place God had asked him to live?
Yeah, why was he still tied to that place?
And then what happened to Sarah, to Rebecca? She also couldn't give birth for 20 years.
This guy didn't learn anything now.
Isaac had to pray for Rebecca before then
interceded for her.
Isaac's own son, Jacob, also found himself in the very same place God had asked them to live. And then the woman he married, Rachel, was also barren. Doesn't that paint a picture for us?
We're losing the case of barrenness.
Yeah. So again, the author doesn't have to explicitly state facts for us to know or deduce that something must be happening under the table or below the bridge.
That is why we have to be very grateful to Jesus for coming to break all these cases, because otherwise, Wahala would have been our portion, you know.
Well, but Dr. Boison, you see, yes, Jesus took that away. But we also have to understand you are dealing with life as humans have known it. That, hey, if if your mother or your father had a problem, even if you were born into a household of priests, it is possible to inherit the defects,
those problems
of your parents or your ancestors. And we can't run away. We just cannot run away from this fact. Don't forget, the Bible will tell us that God went to David, right, in order from David's line to create Jesus. And there were certain things about David. Yes, the grandeur, the man after God's heart. But there were certain things about David that actually, if you look at it carefully, will become problems in the line of Jesus. So, this Bible is a very well-written book. Very well, deliberately written the way it is. Not to confuse us, but rather to train our minds into becoming very sophisticated, being able to tease out certain facts and being able to create real knowledge from available facts. Dr. Boison, we just saw this. 8 verses, and we can glean, in fact, we can tease out over 1 trillion ideas. Right? And that will mean that if we really want to do a good job with this test, we must develop tools. And Dr. Boison, I am trying to develop one. Right? Oh, yeah. There are tools that are there. I'm trying to tweak them to see if it will help me to answer some questions from this. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Good luck on that.
Yes, sir. And for me, as far as I'm concerned, this is what we need to be able to take the facts of our lives and circumstances, right, and create serious knowledge from them. And then be able, because now we live in the age of data, Dr. Boison. Yes. Data is more valuable than gold.
That's true.
So if we learn to work with data, to tease knowledge out of new knowledge, out of existing knowledge, we are creating data, and we can market that data for what? Valuable gold.
Amen. Well, I think that's about what time will allow us. We are 15 minutes. Well, it's an hour, but we started a little bit late, so we are still within the hour. But this is where time will allow us to draw the curtain. But there are a few nuggets that I want us to share. That although we are saved by grace, we also have to realize that even when you get married, there are some ancestral yokes that you have to break, because you are merging with somebody else's life and you don't know what power might have existed in their home before coming together. Thank God for Jesus. You should be broken. But if you look at the story of Abraham, realize that even in his father's house, there were problems and cases. And as we've learned earlier on, I'm sure there were some little gods that were preventing this family from procreating. And that was what God was trying to draw Abraham's attention and take him out of the family and resettle him. But good old Abraham was a little bit disobedient. He was so much in love with the family, he couldn't separate. There are times when you have to separate, because even Bible says through Paul that a man shall leave his father and mother and cleave to his wife. We have to break some of these yokes. And when you have a word from God, please do not disobey, because the consequences are great. Abraham was promised that he would be the father of many nations, but he paid the price. Next week, we'll go into the consequences, and I'm sure Pastor Kwon is still going to be here to help us. Prof, thank you very much for all the insight and the wisdom you bring, the output that you bring here, the atomic sentences and all that we learn. This is actually a Bible college on this platform. So those of you who are taking seminary, it will behoove you and do you good to go back to the clips, Facebook, YouTube, and listen to this divine connection. It will help you, because there's so much wealth of knowledge. We've read the Bible sometimes as a novel, but Pastor Kwon says that artists can show and not tell.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you very much, Prof. God willing, we'll meet again next week and continue from there. Have a good evening. All right.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Sampa bietia Chimafidi nunkotu Era one radio Samupe Jumpa bietia Chimafidi nunkotu Era one radio Oh Ayumpankuma Chintu Asampankuma
They are four women. They are beautiful with brains. They are eloquent, decent, wise, and experienced. You have heard many, the funny. Now, it's time to hear the experience and the brainy. Meet Selena, Dorcas, Gifty, and Annette as they present the real in common getting. In common biaye sesi chain, the dead, as in takre no assume, the dead, the real in common getting. Showing live this and every Sunday, 7 p.m. on Era One Radio on Facebook and on YouTube, Era One Radio and on Taibo channel. Kaise, so we see the real in common getting ya. What brabon tete, we nyan konkonsa, we the real in common getting.
Not your typical tea. The Fumigio Herbal Tea by Glucose Care International is a nutritious drink and a natural blood glucose reducer. Gymnema plant, the active ingredient in the Fumigio Herbal Tea, suppresses the absorption of carbohydrate ingested from your diet. The green tea content in the Fumigio Herbal Tea promotes rejuvenation of dead cells, detoxification of your system, stimulates the pancreas to release insulin, and improves metabolism. Drinking one sachet of Fumigio Herbal Tea after meals prevents the rise in blood sugar levels, suppresses appetite, and improves bowel movements. Drinking Fumigio Herbal Tea regularly after meals can also prevent type 2 diabetes. We encourage you to drink Fumigio Herbal Tea 3 times in a day, coupled with mild exercises to maximize its benefits. Fumigio Herbal Tea has been approved by the FDA. Toxicity test conducted by SGS, so it is safe and non-toxic. A product of Singapore. With Fumigio Herbal Tea, your peace of mind is guaranteed. Call Ashok.
Sampa bietia Chimafidi nunkotu Era one radio Samupe Jumpa Yetia, Timothy, and Uncoto, Era One Radio, and Pampua, Asam Pampua, and Ratum, Era One.